Picture this. You're sitting at a family dinner surrounded by the people who raised you, the ones who promised to love and protect you. Then out of nowhere you find out they've handed your future, your $1 million inheritance, to your brother, leaving you with nothing but excuses. That's not just a betrayal. It's a gut punch that changes everything. My name's Emily and this is my story, a roller coaster of heartbreak, rage, and a revenge so bold it left my entire family speechless. I'm here to tell you how I uncovered my parents' darkest secret and exposed it at my brother's lavish party, turning their world upside down. Buckle up because this one's going to hit you hard. I was 28 when it all started, living in San Francisco, a city that's as dazzling as it is relentless. I'd been working as a graphic designer for a small creative agency, the kind of place where you're expected to hustle 24/7 for a paycheck that barely covers rent. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved it. The late-night sketching logos, the thrill of landing a big client, the feeling of building something with my own hands. I'd always been the artsy one, the dreamer in a family that valued practicality over passion. My parents, Richard and Diane, were old school. Dad was a real estate investor, Mom a retired accountant, and they'd built a comfortable life in the suburbs, complete with a sprawling house and a legacy they were proud to pass down. Or so I thought. My older brother, Nathan, was their pride and joy. At 32 he was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He'd followed Dad's footsteps into real estate, launching his own development firm by his mid-20s. Nathan was charming, polished, the kind of guy who walked into a room and owned it. Growing up, I'd always been in his shadow. He was the straight-A student, the varsity athlete, the son who made my parents' eyes light up. I was the quirky one, the girl who'd rather paint than study, who'd sneak out to concerts instead of networking events. My parents loved me, sure, but it was clear Nathan was their bet for the family's future. I didn't mind, not really. He was my big brother and I adored him even if his success made me feel small sometimes. The inheritance was something we'd all known about since we were kids. My grandfather, a savvy investor, had left my parents a portfolio of properties worth $2 million, to be split evenly between Nathan and me when they passed. It was their promise, their way of ensuring we'd both have a shot at the life they'd worked so hard to build. I'd never counted on it, but it was a safety net, a piece of my future I thought was secure. I'd daydream about using my share to start my own design studio, maybe even travel the world, sketching cities from Paris to Tokyo. Nathan, of course, had bigger plans, expanding his firm, buying up half the city, cementing his name as a real estate titan. That was just Nathan, always reaching for the stars while I was content with a sketchpad and a dream. Things started to shift when Dad got sick. It was a slow creep at first, fatigue, a cough that wouldn't quit. By the time they diagnosed his lung cancer, it was stage 3 and the prognosis wasn't great. I was devastated, spending weekends at their house helping Mom with meals, sitting by Dad's bedside while he talked about the old days. Nathan was there too, but he was different. Distracted, always on his phone talking about deals even as Dad's voice grew weaker. I chalked it up to stress, to his way of coping. But then came the family meeting that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of crisp fall day that makes you want to curl up with a coffee. We were in my parents' living room, the one with the big bay windows and photos of Nathan and me as kids. Dad was in his recliner, an oxygen tube under his nose, looking frielier than I'd ever seen. Mom sat beside him, her hands clasped tight, her face unreadable. Nathan was there too, in a tailored suit, his expression oddly calm. "We need to talk about the inheritance," Dad said, his voice raspy but firm. My stomach dropped. I'd known this was coming. Dad's illness had forced us to face things we'd avoided, but I wasn't ready for what came next. "We've decided to give the entire estate to Nathan," Mom said, her words landing like a bomb. I blinked, my brain struggling to process. "What?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. Dad looked away, his jaw tight, while Mom pressed on. "Nathan's building something important," she said. "His business needs the capital to grow, to secure the family's legacy. You're doing fine, Emily. You don't need it." I stared at them, my chest tightening, my hands trembling. "Fine," I said, my voice rising. "You're giving him $2 million. My share too, and I get nothing?" Nathan finally spoke, his tone smooth, almost patronizing. "It's not personal. It's about what's best for the family. You're an artist, not a mogul. You'll be okay." I felt like the floor had vanished beneath me. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about fairness, about the promise they'd made to me my whole life. I looked at Dad, hoping for a flicker of doubt, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom's face was set like she'd already made peace with it. Nathan just sat there, his hands folded like he'd known this was coming. I stood up, my vision blurring with tears. "You're choosing him over me," I said, my voice shaking. "After everything, you're saying I don't matter." Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "That's not true," she said, but it was too late. I grabbed my coat and left, the door slamming behind me, their voices fading into the autumn air. I drove back to my apartment, a cramped studio with paint-stained floors and a view of a parking lot. I sat on my bed, my head in my hands, replaying the conversation. How had it come to this? I'd always known Nathan was their favorite, but I'd never thought they'd erase me like this. The $1 million wasn't just money. It was my future, my chance to build something of my own. And they'd handed it to him like my dreams were worth less. I cried until my throat was raw, then sat in silence, the weight of their betrayal sinking in. I wanted to scream, to call them and demand answers, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd made their choice. For weeks I was a ghost. I went through the motions at work, sketching designs with a forced smile, but inside I was unraveling. My parents called, leaving voicemails about family unity, but I didn't answer. Nathan texted, offering a half-hearted "let's talk," but I ignored him. I felt alone, like the family I'd trusted had turned their backs on me. Friends tried to help, but their advice, "move on, let it go," felt hollow. How do you let go of $1 million? How do you forgive a betrayal that cuts so deep? I started digging, not sure what I was looking for, just desperate for something to make sense of it all. That's when I found the first clue. I was going through old family photos, trying to remember a time when we felt like a team, when I stumbled across a letter tucked in an album. It was from my grandfather, written to my parents years ago before he died. "The estate is for both children," it read, his handwriting shaky but clear. "Emily and Nathan, equal shares, no exceptions." My heart stopped. This wasn't just a verbal promise. They'd gone against his will, deliberately cutting me out. What were they hiding? I started asking questions quietly at first, reaching out to family friends, my grandfather's old lawyer, anyone who might know something. Most brushed me off, but one cousin, Sarah, let slip a name: Margaret. Margaret was a woman I'd never heard of, someone my parents had never mentioned. Sarah didn't know much, just that Margaret had been close to Dad years ago before I was born, and that there'd been some drama. My gut told me this was the key, the reason they'd favored Nathan so blatantly. I hired a private investigator, a gruff guy named Mike who specialized in family disputes. I gave him everything I had: the letter, Sarah's tip, my parents' sudden decision. "This smells like a cover-up," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Give me a month." I nodded, my savings dwindling but my resolve growing. I wasn't just fighting for the money anymore. I was fighting for the truth. While Mike worked, I kept tabs on Nathan. He was riding high, using the inheritance to fund a massive project. A luxury condo development that had his name plastered all over San Francisco. He was planning a launch party, a glitzy bash at a downtown hotel to celebrate his vision. I saw the invite on social media, all gold foil and champagne emojis, and something snapped. He was living my future, parading it in front of everyone while I was scraping by. That's when the idea hit me. Not just to expose the truth, but to do it at his party, in front of his investors, his friends, his world. I didn't know what Mike would find, but I knew it would be big, and I was going to make sure everyone heard it. I started planning quietly, carefully. I reached out to a former colleague, Jen, who ran a small PR firm. "I need an invite to a party," I told her, keeping my voice casual. She didn't ask questions, just pulled strings to get me on the guest list. I spent nights sketching my speech, imagining the moment I'd step into that ballroom and turn Nathan's triumph into ash. I wasn't the artsy little sister anymore. I was a woman with nothing to lose, and I was coming for them all. Mike's calls were cryptic, but he hinted at something big, something that would blow the family apart. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel it, like a storm gathering on the horizon. My parents thought they'd buried me. Nathan thought he'd won. They were wrong, and I was going to make them see it in the most unforgettable way possible. The sting of betrayal doesn't fade easily. It's like a bruise you keep pressing, each touch reminding you how deeply you've been hurt. My parents had taken my $1 million inheritance, half of my grandfather's estate, and handed it to my brother Nathan like I was an afterthought. Their words, "You're doing fine, Emily," echoed in my head, a cruel dismissal of my dreams, my worth. But finding that letter from my grandfather, stating the estate was meant for both of us, lit a spark in me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the truth, and I was determined to uncover it no matter how ugly it got. My name's Emily, and this is the part of my story where I dig into my family's darkest secret, piece together a plan to expose it at Nathan's lavish party, and face the kind of stakes that could break me, or make me unstoppable. I was still in San Francisco, holed up in my tiny studio apartment, the walls covered in sketches and post-it notes that mapped out my investigation. The city's buzz felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. My days were split between my graphic design job, where I faked smiles and churned out logos, and late nights chasing leads about my family's past. The letter from my grandfather was my starting point, proof they'd gone against his wishes, but it wasn't enough. Who was Margaret, the name my cousin Sarah had mentioned? Why had my parents favored Nathan so blatantly? And what were they hiding that was worth $1 million of my future? I'd hired Mike, a private investigator with a gravelly voice and a nose for secrets, and his cryptic updates, "This is bigger than you think," kept me on edge, fueling both my hope and my fear. The investigation wasn't cheap. Mike's fees were eating through my savings, already stretched thin by San Francisco's brutal cost of living. I was skipping meals, taking on freelance gigs to cover rent, my bank account a constant reminder of how close I was to the edge. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd see Nathan's smug face at that family meeting, hear my parents' excuses, and the anger would flare again. They thought they could erase me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. I started digging on my own too, combing through old family records, calling distant relatives, even visiting the county clerk's office to pull property deeds tied to my grandfather's estate. Most of it was a dead end, dry legal documents, vague anecdotes, but I was learning to think like Mike, to look for the gaps, the things left unsaid. One night I got a break. Mike called, his voice low, like he was worried someone might overhear. "I found Margaret," he said. "Her full name's Margaret Ellison. She was your dad's business partner in the 80s before you were born. They had a falling out, something messy, money maybe more. She's still in the Bay Area, runs a small consulting firm now." My heart raced. Business partner? Why had my parents never mentioned her? "There's more," Mike said. "I'm digging into some financials from back then. Looks like your dad and Margaret were tied up in a deal that went south, and it's connected to your grandfather's properties. Give me a week." I hung up, my mind spinning. A bad deal, a hidden partner. This was the thread I needed to pull, but it felt dangerous, like I was poking at something that could unravel everything. I kept pushing even as the pressure mounted. My job was suffering. I'd missed a deadline for a big client, and my boss was starting to ask questions. "You okay, Emily?" she'd say, her tone more annoyed than concerned. I nodded, lying through my teeth, but I was barely holding it together. My parents were still calling, leaving voicemails about moving forward, but I couldn't face them. Nathan's texts had stopped, replaced by social media posts about his condo project, each one a knife in my chest. He was living large, planning his big launch party while I was rationing coffee and dodging my landlord. The unfairness of it burned, but it also sharpened my focus. That party wasn't just a celebration. It was my stage, my chance to expose whatever Mike found and make them all pay. Planning the confrontation became my obsession. I'd secured an invite through Jen, my PR friend, but getting into the party was only half the battle. I needed to make a splash, something unforgettable. I spent hours scripting my speech, pacing my apartment, practicing in front of a cracked mirror. "I'm Emily Harper," I'd say, my voice steady despite the nerves. "And I'm here to tell you the truth about this family." I imagined the room, glittering chandeliers, clinking glasses, Nathan's smug grin, going silent as I dropped the bombshell. But what was the bombshell? Mike's updates were promising but vague, and I was betting everything on his final report. If he came up empty, I'd be walking into that party with nothing but anger, and that wasn't enough. To hedge my bets, I started building a case of my own. I contacted my grandfather's old lawyer, a retiree named Mr. Callahan, who drafted the estate plan. He was hesitant, citing confidentiality, but I wore him down with persistence. "Your grandfather was clear," he told me over the phone, his voice crackly. "The estate was for you and Nathan, split down the middle. Your parents' decision makes no sense unless they're hiding something." I pressed him for more, but he clammed up, saying he'd already said too much. Still, it was confirmation. My parents had deliberately broken the will, and I was starting to suspect it wasn't just favoritism. There was a secret, and Margaret was the key. I also reached out to a journalist, Tara, who wrote for a local business magazine. I'd met her at a networking event years ago, and she had a reputation for digging into shady deals. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to pique her interest. "I'm working on a story about my family's estate," I said, keeping my voice casual. "There's something off, maybe tied to a real estate deal from the 80s. Can you keep an ear out?" Tara's eyes lit up. "Sounds juicy," she said. "If you've got proof, I'm listening." I promised to follow up, knowing her presence at Nathan's party could amplify whatever I revealed. She agreed to come, her press pass ensuring she'd blend in with the crowd. As the party loomed 3 weeks away, the stakes kept climbing. Mike's investigation was hitting roadblocks. "Old records are hard to come by," he grumbled during one call. "But I'm close. There's a paper trail and it's messy." I was running out of money, my credit cards maxed, my freelance gigs barely covering Mike's retainer. My boss gave me a formal warning after another missed deadline, and I knew I was one mistake away from losing my job. The stress was crushing, keeping me up at night, my dreams filled with Nathan's smirk and my parents' cold stares. Doubt crept in, whispering that I was in over my head, that I'd humiliate myself if Mike didn't deliver. But every time I wavered, I'd reread my grandfather's letter, his words, "No exceptions," a reminder of what I was fighting for. I started preparing for the party like it was a mission. I couldn't afford a new dress, so I borrowed one from Jen, a sleek emerald green number that made me feel like a warrior. I practiced walking in heels, something I rarely wore, determined to look the part. I also worked on my delivery, recording myself to nail the tone, calm but cutting, the kind of voice that commands a room. Jen helped me refine it, her PR instincts sharpening my words. "Hit them with the truth, then pause," she said. "Let it sink in." I nodded, grateful for her support but terrified of what was coming. This wasn't just about exposing a secret. It was about facing my family, maybe losing them forever. Mike's final call came a week before the party, and it was a game changer. "I've got it," he said, his voice heavy. "Margaret Ellison wasn't just your dad's partner, she was his fiancée. They were engaged before he met your mom, working on a real estate deal with your grandfather's money. The deal went bust and Margaret took the fall, losing everything. Your dad walked away, married your mom, and never looked back. But there's a kid." My breath caught. "Big? Nathan's not your full brother," Mike said. "He's Margaret's son. Your parents adopted him after the split, kept it quiet. The inheritance? It's guilt money, Emily. They're paying him off to keep the secret buried." I sat down hard, my head spinning. Nathan was my half-brother, raised as my equal, but my parents had chosen him over me to hide their past. The betrayal cut deeper than ever, but it was also my weapon. I spent the next few days processing, my anger hardening into resolve. Nathan knew he had to. That's why he'd been so calm at the family meeting, so sure he'd get everything. My parents had built their perfect family on a lie, and I was the collateral damage. The party was my chance to blow it all open, to make them face the truth in front of everyone they cared about. I finalized my speech, weaving in Mike's findings, and sent Tara a teaser. "Be at the party. You'll want to hear this." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji, her excitement palpable. The night before the party, I sat in my apartment, the green dress hanging on my closet door, my grandfather's letter on the table. I felt like a soldier before battle, scared but ready. I'd lost my family's love, my future, my trust, but I'd found something else: strength. They thought they could silence me, but I was about to speak louder than ever. Nathan's party wasn't just a celebration. It was the end game, and I was walking in with the truth as my weapon. Whatever happened next, I was done being the forgotten daughter. The air felt electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. I'd spent months unraveling the lie that shattered my world. My parents had given my $1 million inheritance to my brother, Nathan, claiming it was for the family legacy, while leaving me with nothing. But the truth was uglier. Nathan was my half-brother, born to my dad's ex-fiancée, Margaret, and adopted to hide a scandal. They'd chosen him over me to bury their past, and I was done being their sacrifice. Now, standing outside the glitzy hotel where Nathan's launch party was in full swing, I was ready to expose their secret in front of everyone they cared about. My name's Emily, and this is the end of my story. The part where I walk into that ballroom, drop a truth bomb that shakes my family to its core, and find out what it really means to take back your power. I was in San Francisco, the city's lights glittering like a promise I'd been denied. My emerald green dress, borrowed from my friend Jen, hugged my frame, and my heels clicked with purpose as I approached the hotel's entrance. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady, clutching a folder with Mike's report, the proof that would unravel my parents' lies. The past few weeks had been a blur of stress and sacrifice. Maxed out credit cards, a job on the brink, sleepless nights haunted by doubt. But Mike's bombshell about Nathan's parentage had given me the weapon I needed, and I'd spent hours crafting a speech to deliver it with maximum impact. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about making them really see me for the first time. The party was at the Fairmont, a grand hotel with marble floors and chandeliers that screamed wealth. The ballroom was packed, a sea of tailored suits and sparkling gowns, the air thick with champagne and ambition. Nathan was the star, schmoozing with investors, his laughter carrying over the live jazz band. My parents were there too, mingling with San Francisco's elite, their smiles polished but strained. I spotted Tara, the journalist I'd tipped off, near the bar, her notebook discreet but ready. Jen was by my side, her presence a quiet anchor as I scanned the room, my nerves buzzing. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward, the one that would either break me or set me free. I waited, biding my time, blending into the crowd as Nathan took the stage for his big speech. He looked every inch the mogul, his suit pristine, his voice smooth as he unveiled his luxury condo project, funded by my inheritance. "This is a new era for the Harper family," he said, gesturing to my parents who beamed from the front row. The crowd clapped, but I could see cracks. Investors whispering, their faith in Nathan's overleveraged project wavering. That was my cue. As the applause died down, I stepped forward, my heels echoing in the sudden quiet, and climbed onto the stage. The spotlight hit me and every eye in the room locked on. Nathan froze, his smile slipping. "Emily," he said, his voice sharp with confusion. My parents stood, their faces paling, but I didn't look at them. I faced the crowd, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Good evening," I said loud enough to carry. "My name's Emily Harper, and I'm here to tell you the truth about the family you're celebrating tonight." A murmur rippled through the room, heads turning, phones slipping out to record. Nathan took a step toward me, but I raised a hand, stopping him cold. "You all know Nathan as the heir to the Harper legacy," I said, my eyes sweeping the crowd. "But what you don't know is that my parents gave him my $1 million inheritance, half of my grandfather's estate, to hide a secret they've kept for decades." The murmurs grew louder, a buzz of shock and curiosity. My mom gasped, clutching Dad's arm, while Nathan's face twisted with anger. "What are you doing?" he hissed, but I ignored him, pulling Mike's report from the folder. "Nathan isn't my full brother," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "He's the son of Margaret Ellison, my father's ex-fiancée, adopted after a failed real estate deal that cost her everything. My parents gave him my inheritance to keep this quiet, to protect their perfect image while cutting me out of my own future." I held up the report, pages shaking slightly in my hand. "This is the proof. Legal documents, financial records, the truth they thought they'd buried." The room erupted, gasps and whispers turning into a roar. Tara was scribbling furiously, her eyes wide, while investors shouted questions, their faith in Nathan crumbling. My parents were frozen, Mom's hand over her mouth, Dad's face ashen. Nathan lunged for the report, his voice rising. "This is a lie," he yelled, his composure gone. "She's jealous, making this up." But the crowd wasn't buying it. I stepped closer, my voice calm but razor sharp. "Jealous," I said, meeting his gaze. "You took my future, Nathan. You knew the truth and let them erase me. Now everyone knows who you really are." I turned to my parents, my heart aching but my resolve unbroken. "And you chose a lie over your own daughter. This is what happens when you bet against me." I stepped off the stage, the crowd parting as I walked toward the exit. People were clapping now, some shouting encouragement, others bombarding Nathan with questions he couldn't answer. Tara caught my arm, her face lit with excitement. "This is huge," she said. "I'm running this tomorrow." I nodded, my throat tight. "Just tell the truth," I said, then kept walking, Jen at my side. Behind me, I heard Nathan's voice crack, my parents' pleas fading into the chaos. I stepped into the cool night air, my breath steady, my head high. I'd done it. I'd exposed their secret, taken back my voice, and turned their celebration into a reckoning. The fallout was swift and brutal. Tara's article hit the next morning, headlined "Family Secrets and Stolen Millions. The Harper Scandal Unveiled." It detailed Nathan's parentage, the rigged inheritance, and my grandfather's violated will, backed by Mike's documents and interviews with party guests. The story went viral, picked up by local news, then national outlets, with hashtags like #HarperBetrayal trending online. Nathan's condo project tanked. Investors pulled out, citing trust issues, and his firm filed for bankruptcy within weeks. He vanished from the public eye, his social media dark, his golden boy image shattered. My parents tried to reach me, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologies to accusations. "Emily, you've ruined us," Mom sobbed in one. "How could you?" I didn't respond. Their choice had broken something in me and no words could fix it. I heard through Jen that they'd moved to a smaller house, their social circle shrinking as the scandal followed them. Margaret Ellison surfaced, giving a quiet interview to Tara, confirming her role as Nathan's mother and her heartbreak over the years. She didn't blame me, she said, but wished it hadn't come to this. I felt a pang for her, a woman caught in my family's mess, but it didn't change what I'd done. I wasn't unscathed. My job was gone. My boss fired me after the missed deadlines and I was living off freelance work, my savings drained by Mike's fees. The family I'd known was gone too. No more Sunday dinners, no more holiday cards. My parents' silence was louder than their anger, and Nathan's absence left a hole I hadn't expected. I'd won, but at a cost, and some nights I'd lie awake wondering if I'd gone too far. Had I needed to be so public, so ruthless? Could I have confronted them privately, spared the collateral damage? But then I'd remember the family meeting, the way they'd dismissed me, and the doubt would fade. They'd made their choice and I'd made mine. The exposure wasn't just destruction, it was creation. Tara's article gave me a platform and I started getting offers. Speaking gigs, freelance design contracts, even a book deal from a small publisher wanting my story. I launched my own design studio, Harper Creative, using the last of my savings and a small loan from Jen. It was tiny, just me and a laptop, but it was mine, built on my terms. Clients loved my story, the artist who fought back, who turned betrayal into triumph. And my portfolio grew slowly but steadily. I wasn't rich, but I was free, and that was worth more than $1 million. Looking back, I see the cost of my choice, but I also see the strength it gave me. I lost my family, but I found myself. Nathan's party wasn't just a stage for revenge. It was where I stopped being the forgotten daughter and started being Emily Harper, the woman who wouldn't be silenced. My parents thought they could bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed ready to break through the dirt and bloom. If you're watching this and you've ever been wronged by family, by friends, by life, know this: you don't have to stay quiet. You can fight, you can speak, you can take back what's yours. It won't be easy and it might cost you, but it'll show the world who you are. I did it and I'm still standing, scars and all. My family's secret was their weapon, but the truth was mine, and I used it to build a future they can't touch. Thanks for hearing my story. It's not just about what I lost, it's about what I gained, and that's a victory worth celebrating.